So this spiritual orientation means, you know what? In the first session, I talked about it. This means that what is the objective of life? Attenuation of the lower self so that the real higher self shines through. What is the attenuation of the lower self? The denying our lower planes, what comes from our lower planes of our personality, denying them, the frittering away of the energies of the lower plane, so that the manifestation of the higher plane happens. So which means that making our lives full of new habits, new practices, new ways of thinking, new ways of speaking, new ways of behaving with the world, which means the interaction with the world, the way we interact with the world has to change. Currently, we are operating in a negative, self-centered kind of a situation. We are operating on a lower plane. What is the higher plane? Bring in slowly, progressively, bring in unselfishness in our lives. Unselfishness is the ticket, is the gateway to bring in the higher plane of our lives. This opening up, making our life slowly.
कैसे होगा? I mean, I'm sorry, I'm asking too many things.
But today we're talking about unselfishness. I will talk about the next part is all about how to do it.
But how can you become unselfish when you are surrounded by the people who are selfish?
Yes, we'll talk about it. In the next few slides, it's all about unselfishness. This opening up or this breaking free from the shackles of what we have built around ourselves, this network of expectation and selfishness, is basically giving us a limited life, and this has to be broken. How do we do that? So the definition of the word, which we said that taking our consciousness, not the spiritual Vedantic definition of consciousness. Let's talk about the Western definition of consciousness. That our field of awareness, when we are aware of things, when we are thinking, when we are talking, when we are understanding, we are aware, right? There is awareness. We are being aware. We are aware. This definition of consciousness is in the English dictionary is basically a combination of our thinking, our feeling, and our will. Correct? Thinking, feeling, will. Now, spiritual orientation means we have to change the way we think, change the way we feel, and change the way that our will is driving us into action. So let us evaluate what is the current thinking. Our current thinking is based on our intellectual knowledge and the valuable experience of life. Through the valuable experience of life, we've learned many things. We've stumbled, we've stuttered, we've gone through life, and that has given us a teaching, right? We try to apply those teachings. Some people learn the hard way. Some people don't learn even the hard way, and then they go through multiple situations of happiness and sorrow. Now, this intellectual knowledge will not lead to the attenuation of the lower self, which means the highest self will not shine through. This will not help us raise our consciousness level. This will also not help us in developing the intensity. So what do we need to do? We will need to combine higher knowledge. So Harry, when this higher knowledge is coming, we're understanding a lot of things of our lives, right? Right? Higher knowledge is giving us a pathway to understand a lot of things, which means that higher knowledge has to be a constant inspiration, constant source of what we think, what we do in our lives. This framework always has to be kept at the background. Second part is, what is our feelings today? What are our feelings today?
Centered on our selfish, unselfish motives are,
yes.
It's self-interest.
Yes. Our feelings are for the possessions. We are passionate about our gadgets. We are passionate about our desires, our ambition. We are passionate about our relationships, isn't it? We're passionate about all these things. Our emotional energies are invested in the things of the world, which means we are detached from the only thing that is permanent in the world, and we are attached to all the things that are impermanent in the world. Harry kahan gaya? We are attached to all the things that are impermanent in the world. So changing our feelings means what? Reversing this. Reversing means trying to develop a relationship with God, trying to get attached to God, and trying to get detached from the world. Detachment from the world means that I am trying to build a universal personality. I am detaching myself from the narrow, limited individual psyche, and trying to attach myself to the universal psyche. That is the meaning of detachment. Detachment doesn't mean that मैं संसार से थोड़ा अलग हो जाऊं, मैं संसार के बारे में नहीं सोचूं. Detachment means that I will attach myself to a universal psyche, and I will be much more responsible, much more interested in what my family needs, in what I can do for the world or for the community. Then the next part is, so in this context, Sri Ramakrishna has a beautiful example. He talks about Vairagya. What does Vairagya mean? Dispassion. So Vairagya, he's actually explaining that Vishaye Birag, Vishay, with the objects of the world, I start developing a disinterest for the objects of the world. So when a lot of people understand detachment only by this Vishaya Birag, detachment from the objects of the world. If there is only detachment from the objects of the world, the spiritual orientation will not come. So Sri Ramakrishna is explaining Vishaye Birag or Ishware Anurag. Ishware Anurag means I develop love for God. Only when I develop love for God, I can attach myself to the universal psyche. Which comes to the last point, the will. What is the will? Today, our will is defined by an individual-centered will, which means I want to do this, I want to do that. Once again, it is governed by the wrong knowledge. The wrong knowledge of acquiring things, acquiring name, acquiring identity, acquiring fame. So unless we break out of this individual-centered will and make it a socially centered will, when socially centered will, what happens? When we have a socially centered will, what happens? Our life becomes universal. That we start thinking more about people who are not related to us. So the problem is what? The biggest problem is our thinking is governed by wrong knowledge. Our feelings are guided by wrong knowledge. Harry, you're back?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No problem. I'll just repeat the last part I said.
There was a power failure. It took 2 minutes. It takes 2
No
minutes.
problem. I'll just repeat the last part. The first part I said was thinking has to change by the higher level thinking, right? Because this thinking, this knowledge will not lead us to the attenuation of the lower self. The second part I talked about was, today, what are our feelings? Our feelings are for the world, our possessions, we are passionate about our gadgets, our desires, our ambitions, our relationships, right? All our emotional energies are invested in the things of the world. So we are detached from the only thing that is permanent in the world, which is God, and we are attached to all the things that are impermanent in the world, right? This thing has to be reversed. We slowly start to kind of being attached to the God, which is only permanent, and detachment from the world. Detachment from the world also has a very significant underpinning, an undertone. Detachment doesn't mean that मैं संसार से अलग हो जाऊं. Detachment means I yank out my individual-centered complex from my psyche, and I attach myself to the universal psyche. What is God? God is universal. So we attach ourselves to the universal psyche. The last part is our will. All our actions, all our thoughts are governed by an individual-centered will. We have to convert this to a socially centered will, which means that all our actions have to be governed by what can I do for you, this thinking. What can I do for you, not only for my family, but for people around me. I was having an interesting conversation with my friend recently, a friend of mine. I called him up and I was telling him, boss, क्या कर रहा है, क्या कर रहा है? मैंने बोला, तू कुछ time होगा तो 9:30 का session attend कर. So he started talking about his life and he said, that, you know what I've decided? I've decided to spend the rest of my life, after 4 or 5 years retire, and spend the rest of my life on my family. And when my grandchildren come, that's my life. Not for me, for others. I told him, but actually you're only thinking about yourselves. Your family is thinking about yourselves. If you spend your whole life for thinking about yourself and your grandchildren, that's being selfish. You know? So what is the problem? The problem is that our thinking is guided by wrong knowledge. Our feeling is guided by wrong knowledge. And therefore, the will is also got automatically guided by wrong knowledge. So Swamiji is saying that take my advice, set yourselves wholly to the service of others. Believe me, far greater happiness would then be yours than if you had a whole treasury full of money and other valuables at your command. As you go on your way serving others, you will advance accordingly in the path of knowledge. The more we serve, the more we do get nishkam karma in our lives, the more chitta shuddhi happens, and the more from inside the mind purifies. When the mind purifies, the knowledge manifests. Is as simple as that. Society is the greatest where the highest truths become practical. That is my opinion. And if society is not fit for the highest truths, make it so, and sooner the better. Stand up, men and women, in the spirit. Dare to believe the truth. Dare to practice the truth. And the next one is beautiful. In the world, take always the position of the giver. Give everything and look for no return. Give love, give help, give service, give any little thing you can, but keep out barter. Make no conditions, and none will be imposed. Let us give out our bounty just as God gives to us. The Lord is the only giver. All the men in the world are only shopkeepers. Get his check, and it must be honored everywhere. God is inexplicable, inexpressible essence of love, to be known but never defined. Therefore, we have to understand this very, very important truth, and this becomes the fulcrum of our spiritual life, that the more we engage in fulfilling ourselves from the things of the world without giving back, the more we will feel unfulfilled, the more pronounced will be the feeling of restlessness. Yea, this is science, this is proven, this has been given to us by our rishis. So Sri Ramakrishna in the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna says, those who distribute their wealth with society through charity, their wealth will be protected. Or jo log charity mein daan nahi karenge, they will lose their wealth in 4 different ways. He talks about 4 different ways. What are the 4 different ways? Wealth will slip out of their hands through theft, through court cases, medical expenses, and their children themselves will squander it. There is this beautiful story in Swami Vivekananda's life. He was in Chicago at that point of time. And that point of time, Rockefeller, the Rockefeller Foundation, Rockefeller was one of the greatest billionaires at that point of time. And he was an extremely miserly person. He was very, very selfish. And he was going through a tremendous amount of torment. He was not happy, not peaceful. And he had a tremendous amount of wealth. So somebody told him, why don't you go and meet this Hindu monk, Swami Vivekananda? He's staying in this particular place. So one day he decides to go and meet Swami Vivekananda in rushes. He opens the door, he rings the bell, somebody opens the door. He doesn't even wait. He walks straight up into Swami Vivekananda's room. Swami Vivekananda is sitting on a table and is writing something. He doesn't even kind of notice that somebody is coming to the room. He's wrapped in concentration. He comes in and tells him, look, I've come. So Swami Vivekananda says, yeah, so tell me, who are you? And this suddenly Rockefeller is not used to, somebody asking him, who are you? So Swami Vivekananda tells him that you are merely a custodian of your wealth. Basically, what happens is that Swami Vivekananda tells Rockefeller 3-4 things about his life. And Rockefeller is completely flabbergasted that how does this person know? And Swami Vivekananda tells him, I can read you like a glass factory. I know your past, I know your future, because he had those powers. And that's the point in time he tells him, he gives him this advice. My dear Rockefeller, remember you're not the owner of your wealth. The wealth has been given to you by God. You're only a custodian of your wealth. Utilize this money to remove the sufferings of millions of people. Immediately you will get peace of mind. There is no other way. The purpose of life is to get peace and happiness, not to earn wealth only. Later on in the biography, so what happens is, immediately Rockefeller leaves, comes back after 4 or 5 days, once again goes straight into Swami Vivekananda's room. Swami Vivekananda is wrapped in concentration, doesn't notice, goes close to his table and kind of puts on the table a piece of paper. Swami Vivekananda looks up and asks him, what is it? It's basically a big donation he's kind of put for an institution. And Swami Vivekananda says, so he says, you should thank me. I'm giving this donation. Swami Vivekananda says that it is not I who should be thanking. It is you who should be thanking me. That actually that's the genesis of the Rockefeller Foundation. Later on in his biography, Rockefeller writes that there is more to money than life. Money is only a trust in one's hand. To use it improperly is a great sin. The best way to prepare for the end of life is to live for others. That is what I am trying to do. Therefore, so we have to understand that we are actually living in a world which is interconnected. Society has been built on that premise that how we kind of seek each other's support, that how we have to understand. During COVID, we understood this, that help can come from unexpected quarters. Help can come from unexpected quarters. We have to understand the fact that we are actually living in a society which is social, which is bound. Everybody is connected to each other. So therefore, unless we build this social orientation in our lives, unless we naturally build a collaborative mindset, we will never be successful. We will never be happy.